From the earliest of conversations about this film, we really wanted to make sure this was about the emotional experience of a teenager.
I had the idea of Riley being a teenager, going through puberty and all the changes that come along with it. At the end of the first film, it's perfectly teed up. They're like, what's that? What's puberty?
I don't know. It's probably not important.
At this age, you're suddenly incredibly self-conscious, and you start to look at yourself and compare yourself to others.
You hit 12, 13 years old, and your attention really starts to look to your peers and how they judge you.
That transition into being a teenager is kind of brutal.
We become more emotionally sophisticated as we grow up, and also more of a mess.
It's demo day!
It's a time in our lives when we start asking those bigger, scarier questions. Who am I? Am I enough? Where do I belong?
Feelings that were familiar and well-known are suddenly experienced as much more intense than they were before. And then a whole bunch of new feelings show up on the scene.
Kelsey had a list of emotions that he wanted to explore and think about, and he started to sort of pare that down.
I think our first screening, we had 9 new emotions show up. There are a lot. There are too many.
It was an embarrassment of riches for sure, and we got attached to them. Hard letting go of some of them. I think ultimately it's like what makes sense for what Riley's going through at this period in her life.
I needed to reduce it down to the emotions that can actually help tell Riley's story and Joy's story.
Wow, you have a lot of energy. So Anxiety is a great character because at first she really matches Joy's energy, and Joy is like, great, a hard worker like me. We're gonna do so many great things together.
Okay, how can I help?
Anxiety really does want the best for Riley. Anxiety's big fear is that Riley's gonna be alone next year when she goes to high school, and so she's doing everything she can to help Riley.
And my job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see.
But she's Anxiety, so she kind of does it in the wrong way.
In a way, she's a perfectionist, and yeah, she wants to keep Riley winning, and she wants to keep Riley with the cool folks, and she wants to make sure Riley is the best she can be.
Let's go.
But she doesn't have the healthiest ideas around this. That's the problem.
Anxiety was something I always knew I wanted to deal with, and that was a hard character to come up with too. She wasn't easy. She went through lots of different evolutions.
We have to capture the feeling of the emotion in the design.
It's so much more than just figuring out the shapes and lines and colors. You're really getting to know this character that you're designing because every choice you make is super intentional. So by the end of it, this is the result of you, honestly and very deeply, knowing who your character is and how they behave.
It was fun trying to figure out how is this character going to move with all these weird like limbs, these giant hands and this big head and these giant feet. She's almost bird-like in a way. Like everything she does is very fast, very twitchy. We like to do these things with her where she's like going on and on and on and stop. She's like thinking about stuff, so she's very fidgety. Yeah, if she had a fidget cube, she would just constantly press all the buttons. She's thinking of the future and what happens next, and her mind is constantly going.
Anxiety is just part and parcel of the human experience, especially when you're going through change and you're evolving and growing as Riley is.
Yes, anxiety and stress and negative thinking are bad, but they can protect you. Like, if you're too joyful all the time, you're never gonna remember to bring your umbrella. And sometimes you need your umbrella because it rains.
Anxiety alerts our attention and organizes our mind and focuses it on uncertainties. And that's all really important.
What's your name, big fella?
That's embarrassment.
That's a big one that's at this age.
As kids move into the teenage years, their brains become more complex. And with that comes the ability to take the perspective of another person. And so suddenly we see teenagers feeling embarrassed about things.
The feeling of everyone's eyes on you and not wanting the eyes on you. He wants to hide. We did some early designs of what embarrassment looked like, and I think embarrassment was a lot shorter. I was like, I want a big character. I'm like, embarrassment, it's perfect. he can't hide. He's too big.
It was interesting for me to design like the biggest character. We tried to keep his silhouette, everything kinda in. He tried to make himself as not noticeable as possible.
So I think all the big like shape things are in place.
Embarrassment, we landed on the hoodie thing. It served the purpose of him being able to hide.
Embarrassment does a couple of really important things. Its signal, which I studied, you know, the blush and covering of the face and the turning away, like a lot of what we call appeasement displays in social mammals, signals to other individuals like, hey, I made a mistake, forgive me. It triggers a lot of forgiveness, right, and reconciliation very powerfully.
In contrast to embarrassment, envy is the smallest of the emotions.
But she's got a big appetite for the world and the things that she wants.
We've cast the great Io Adebari as the voice of envy.
I like it. Because I was playing a character that was so small, I feel like we had the idea of getting to make the voice really like big. Val wants us! Sometimes it's really high, and sometimes it's very low, and sometimes it's very like very Muppety. Coach will either make us a Firehawk or doom us to a friendless future.
She just came in with so many interesting ideas and thoughts that are really helping shape this character.
However, much of that is usable.
Envy was probably the hardest one to figure out who she was.
It is an I want emotion. You can kind of quickly go to a place that's sort of whiny or complainy.
We struggle with how she is not likable. Envy went through a bunch of completely different designs. One day, Kelsey had this drawing of this character with like just a big eyes. And then from there, Jason Deemer said like, maybe inspiration should be like, you know, sad wet puppy.
It's like this sweet little, you know, it's like a dog wanting your food, right? Like, I want that, you know?
We started really thinking about what's good about envy.
Bringing envy into the picture really does capture something that I think teenagers feel all the time. Aware of skills or talents that other kids have, that they themselves wish they had, wondering how they can get it. And they use that as sort of inspiration to work harder, to stretch themselves. And in the process of envying and admiring, they expand their own capacities.
Pardon, excusez-moi. I've been waiting my whole life for this very moment.
I think one of the hardest parts about being a teenager is you have to become increasingly independent while still living at home. Your folks know what you're eating, what you're doing. They know a lot of details of your life no matter what you do. And so one of the ways that teenagers accomplish a sense of independence is by becoming more psychologically distant. And so for me, Ennui captures some of that.
Love Ennui. Love her. Ennui was a fantastic challenge because she's essentially boredom, but she's also more nuanced. She has layers of chronic dissatisfaction, general weariness. You know, there's this undercurrent of entitlement. So I really loved the whole princess spoiled brat angle.
The history of the word and the emotion itself traces back to French aristocracy and the children who had everything, and that led to absolute boredom and disillusionment.
The best piece of reference was always found in some royal painting of a princess just covered in luxury and looking so bored. Ennui is all about minimal effort.
Ennui is really lazy and blasé. Like, she always in position where you can feel how much she's bored.
Whenever you see a pose of Ennui, it's almost as if she's melting. I always think of, you know, when they make taffy, it's just candy that's sagging. So I feel that, for me, Ennui is a little bit like that. Whenever you pose her, it's kind of like, she does not care. Sometimes she puts things in perspective, like she brings the drama back to a bit of a normal level sometimes.
Ennui makes you take a kind of reflection and distance. It's the good point about ennui.
That emotion can help bring things in balance a little bit.
Riley, you okay?
Riley's emotional life in Inside Out 2 is emblematic of our times. Too many young people are too anxious, self-critical, perfectionistic. So we have to think about how do we provide antidotes to that.
These new emotions that start to show up at this age, you're suddenly incredibly self-conscious. You start looking at yourself and seeing nothing but flaws. That's what I want the movie to be about. And for Riley to realize that you are worthy and you are worth celebrating.
There's a lot of wisdom in, a 13-year-old watching this film today and saying, how can I be kind to myself? How can I remember my good self? How can I rely on friends?
We're at a moment in our culture where there can feel like there's a lot of pressure to try to be happy, to try to experience joy. It's wonderful to feel good, but that's actually not what mental health is. And I love the way this film challenges that idea and actually aligns with the reality that being healthy and whole means letting yourself have a full range of emotions, welcoming them in, not being frightened of them, and using them all to enrich our lives and also to help us make choices going forward.